Welcome back. I'm Rachel Blevins. Now, one of the topics that we've been talking about here has been the international response to the ongoing situation between Israel and Hamas and in Gaza. And that response coming from countries like China and Russia has been to call for a ceasefire and to call for pursuing a two-state solution in an effort to stop the current atrocities from continuing to happen on this endless cycle that they seem to remain on. But not everyone is happy about that. Certainly not the United States, not Israel, and not some in the mainstream media. In fact, we're seeing almost a coordinated campaign, it feels like, of articles that are criticizing China for calling for peace in the Middle East. Yes, you heard that right. We've got articles coming from Reuters and Bloomberg, notably. Looking at the one from Reuters, they point to the fact that when China announced a surprise deal restoring ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran this year, it signaled Beijing's desire to be a diplomatic heavyweight in the Middle East. But then they say that the crisis in Israel and Gaza threatens to expose the limits of that ambition. And it seems like there's almost this blame here of saying, yeah, it's fine and good that China was able to make some progress in ways that the United States never has. But the fact that they are not having the Western approved response to the current conflict means that they are to blame in some way. And it is notable how this is being carried across the mainstream media. You have in Bloomberg, they say that Chinese President Xi Jinping's reply to the Hamas attack shows China's limits as a peacemaker. So very similar wording here, saying that while Beijing says that it's friends to both sides, it hasn't condemned Hamas specifically, and also noting that Israel and the U.S. have blasted China's response to civilian deaths, while it, again, is calling for peace moving forward. So let's get into all of this with our next guest. Joining me now to discuss is Carl Zaw, host of the Silk and Steel podcast on China, history, culture, and politics. Carl, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me again, Rachel.
Now, when it comes to the current situation, we're looking at these articles, at least from Reuters and from Bloomberg, where they have very similar wording, saying that all of this current conflict that we're now in, it's showing that there are these limits on China with its diplomatic ambitions, limits on it as a peacemaker. What do you think is behind what at least seems like sort of a coordinated attack here?
This got to be the stupidest psyops to come out of the United States government this year, so far, because we still have 3 months left.
So far.
Right. I mean, what we're looking right now, China had a very principled response because in the official Chinese foreign policy statement, it stated that China is deeply concerned over the current escalation of tensions and violence between Palestine and Israel. We call on relevant parties to remain calm, exercise restraint, and immediately end the hostilities to protect civilians and avoid further deterioration of the situation. The recurrence of the conflict shows once again that the protracted standstill of the peace process cannot last. The fundamental way out of this conflict lies in the implementing this two-state solution and establishing an independent state of Palestine. The international community needs to act with greater urgency, step up input into the Palestine question, facilitate the early resumption of peace talks between Palestine and Israel, and find a way to bring about enduring peace. China will continue to work relentlessly with the international community toward that end. So this is a full official statement by Chinese ministry. And the Chinese official stance toward Israel-Palestine conflict is essentially the same as China stands to the Ukraine war, because China is against violence and conflict and calls for immediate ceasefire and peace talk. Now, this is of course does not fit into Washington's agenda. We have the Senate Majority Leader Schumer in Beijing, and he's expressing his regret that China disappointment in China for showing no sympathy or support for Israel during these tough, troubled times.
The ongoing events in Israel over the past few days are horrific. I urge you and the Chinese people to stand with the Israeli people and condemn these cowardly and vicious attacks. I was very disappointed, to be honest, by the Foreign Ministry statement that showed no sympathy or support for Israel during these troubled times.
尊重彼此人民选择的荷兰岛，尊重彼此的核心利益，尊重各自的发展的权利。
First of all, China is not America. China is not obligated to support Israel no matter what. And second of all, China is an independent sovereign nation. None of these people are in any position to tell China what to do. And certainly China's position in the Middle East have been very clear from the very beginning. And when Xi Jinping hosted the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in June, he actually stated that the fundamental solution to the Palestinian question lies in the establishment of an independent Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. So China's position haven't changed. So why do we see all these hopium and copium from the usual suspects from like think tanks coming out of Atlantic Council, etc.? Because right now, I always say, whenever there's reporting in Western media about China, it's almost 100% projection. What the reality is, the U.S. project for Middle East is in shambles. China actually helped to broker the peace talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The U.S. response to that was to broker the peace, to broker the détente between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, with the current escalation of tensions, what we're looking at is the Israel-Saudi rapprochement brokered by Washington is dead in the water. If anything, this current conflict will accelerate and deepen the Saudi-Iran peace process. I mean, for any clear observer of the Middle East politics, this is clearly not a win for the United States. This is why they must spin it as somehow a failure of China, of PRC, to step in as peacemaker, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're alleging that, oh, it's China's fault that they, sure, they figured out Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that's all fine and good, but they didn't figure out Israel and Palestine, and that's a really important conflict that now we need to focus on. It's interesting because when you were talking about the statement from China there, it just reminds me that the response from the United States to all of this has been very reactionary. You have Biden coming out saying, we stand with Israel, we're going to do whatever we can to help them out. You've got the State Department refusing to say anything about the children in Gaza who are being killed right now. And you even have some politicians like Senator Lindsey Graham calling for Gaza to be leveled, for 2 million people to essentially be killed as a response to the initial attack from Hamas. And then you've got a country like China that has a very measured approach and that essentially says, look, if we want to prevent this from happening again and again, which is going to keep happening if we don't make some serious changes, why don't we pursue this, this, and this? And yes, of course, you've got Beijing condemning the loss of life, calling for peace, but that's almost ignored by the West when they are wanting sort of this reactionary stance. They're wanting everyone to get on board and say, yeah, more war. Why is it that calling for peace is now suddenly frowned upon?
Because for these people, it's never about a principle. It's never about peace. It's for these people, everything is about hegemony. So they have to do everything, spin in every angle to show that U.S. is still the top dog. No matter what the other countries, the potential competitor of U.S. do, whether Russia or China, they're also not good enough. They fall just short. And of course, U.S. is actually the indispensable partner in the Middle East political process, which is ridiculous. A lot of this mess we're in right now is the direct result of the U.S. intervention. U.S. has always propped up Israel no matter what, despite its horrendous record, occupying Palestine and creating the world's largest open-air prison that is Gaza Strip. And Israel, United States is not a honest a peace broker. Everyone knows that. None of these so-called analysts even predicted the Saudi-Iran peace deal that was brokered by China. And now they're coming out and saying, China hasn't done enough. Are you kidding me? It's almost like somehow China is responsible for all the horrible atrocities that Israel is inflicted upon the civilian population of Palestine, or for the horrible U.S. policy of propping up Israel whenever it can. We're living in like 1984 bizarro world right now. War is peace.
Yeah, it really does feel that way. And, it's also notable here that the United States doesn't want to get involved in the peace process, but it doesn't want anyone else to get involved in the peace process. We remember back to the spring of 2022 when you had Turkey there negotiating a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and the U.S. and its Western allies said, nope, we can't have that. And even in the situation with Saudi Arabia and Iran and restoring ties there, I remember when that happened, and there was almost kind of this place where the United States didn't even know how to respond to it. The Biden administration, when they were asked about it in press conferences, they were kind of like, yeah, that's fine and good, but it really set the standard for the fact that another country like China can come into a region where the United States has almost kind of been king in its influence for so long now. And China can come in and say, hey, let's actually have conversations, let's talk, and let's possibly restore ties. So do you think that there's a certain level where the United States is jealous, or does it just come back to the fact that they don't want anyone else, especially not China or Russia, to be getting involved in a region where the U.S. sees itself as being the biggest influence there?
Yeah, definitely. This is, U.S. is very jealously guarding its position as the global hegemon. It's like U.S. is acting like Middle East is its own little precious. You cannot have anybody else touch it. And it's just this is just reflects again this mentality of American exceptionalism and this American hegemony at all costs mentality that prevails in Washington. And this is not the mentality that will lead us to everlasting peace. We are in the current crisis right now, precisely because of the U.S. policy. Because none of the top U.S. diplomats in Middle East or anywhere else has seriously placed resolving Palestinian issue at the core, as the core of the foreign policy. Their foreign policy is very simple. We always stand behind Israel, and Israel has completely figured out the United States. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Netanyahu was on record of saying, U.S. will support us no matter what. So we don't need to be afraid of international criticism. U.S. will always stand behind Israel.
שהמחיר יהיה כבד מצוא, כרגע המחיר לא כבד מצוא, על זה התקפה רבת היקף על הרשות הפלסטינית. זה לפחד שהכל מתמוטט. לא פוחדים, צוחקים להם, יראו לנו לתוך הישר וצחוק ופשוט הם לא פוחדים. זה מה שמביא אותם ואז רגע, אבל אז השוק מהעולם יגיד מה, אתם כובשים? אתה לא מפחד מהעולם, ביבי. במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה לא שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון. לא יפריעו לנו.
שאני אם אנחנו עושים לזה משהו, אז הם...
יש עליה, אז נניח שהם אומרים משהו. 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בנו. זה אבסורד.
Because U.S. government writes a blank check for the Israeli government actions. And right now, the people in Washington are turning the Pikachu face when players like China are stepping in to act as honest brokers for peace.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely seems to be the case. Now, when it comes to the response to what's happening in Israel and in Gaza, we have the United States, obviously, with their response, they're very clear. Then we have the countries like China and like Russia that are calling for peace, calling for a two-state solution. And it reminds me of this approach that we've seen to a continent like Africa. You have the United States coming in with threats and basically saying you're either going to do what we want or else your citizens will pay the price. And then you also have countries like Africa and China, or like China and Russia, that come in and say, hey, we want to work with you. We want to come together on deals that are mutually beneficial. So what is the message that they are now sending by daring to call for peace in Gaza and in Israel and to call for actual solutions that could lead to things changing down the road?
Well, for one thing, U.S. is not the world leader that it was often proposed in the Western media. When they talk about international community, they're just talking about U.S. and European vassal states plus a couple of U.S. client states in East Asia, Japan, South Korea, etc. The vast majority of the countries in the world sees through the injustice U.S. and Israel has inflicted upon civilian population of Palestine, and polls after polls of the global perception, China and Russia pose ahead of U.S. And this is a fact that the people in Washington cannot accept, and their response is to double down on their existing policies. And now they're saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. And what they really mean is that Israel has a right to commit war crimes by indiscriminate bombing on the Gaza Strip, where people have nowhere to run. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu demands the people of Gaza to get out so they can level the place. But where can the people in Gaza go? They are literally holed up in this open air prison and that they have constructed. Then you say, oh, you get out now before we level this place. Where can these people go? This is the policy of the United States and Israel right now is openly calling for genocide of the Palestinian people. This is a gross injustice that's not being ignored by the true international community.
Yeah, I think it's one thing if they want to respond to the attack by Hamas. It's another thing to take that a step further and then to say that they are going to launch a complete siege on this region where, as you noted, the people are stuck there, the civilians are stuck there, and they are the ones who are now being impacted by this. Now, Biden did call Netanyahu and apparently called for them to aim for less civilian casualties. So I guess that shows that he knows that things are getting bad. But Netanyahu is warning of a ground invasion and he's ruling out negotiations. What kind of message does that send when you have the Israeli leader literally saying, no, we're not going to negotiate. We're going to continue on with this siege no matter who it targets. And they're doing that because they know that the United States is going to support them.
Exactly. I mean, U.S. has already authorized additional ammunition supply to Israel. Israel by itself, it cannot fight a long-lasting war. They simply don't have the stockpiles for it, and they don't have the industrial capacity for it. And it relies on continuous support from the United States, which United States is providing unconditionally. Well, there's some doubts over that because U.S. is already stretched even to provide 155 millimeter artillery shells to Ukraine, and right now it's going to come down to Ukraine or Israel. And the funny thing is, lately over social media space, nobody is talking about Ukraine at the moment. Everybody is now suddenly switched from I stand with Ukraine to I stand with Israel. So Ukraine almost stays in the forgotten corner. And again, United States cannot afford to be engaged in a two-front war in both Ukraine and Middle East, and that's just not simply feasible. Despite $1 trillion spent on the military budget, U.S. currently lacks the industrial capacity to be the global hegemon that it wants to be. And in a wider issue, Israel is Benjamin Netanyahu was facing a domestic opposition before this. This was a very convenient. This whole crisis was very convenient for Benjamin Netanyahu to consolidate his power in Israel, a deeply divided society, and it's to shift attention from his failed domestic policies. But the United States is underwriting all this cost or the desire ambition of this maniac, and this is going to only plunge the Middle East into a deeper and potentially wider war, because if Israel does go all in on Gaza, the Lebanon Hezbollah will for sure get involved, and that means Hezbollah's allies, Iran and possibly Syria as well. So we are looking at a possible World War III scenario with especially with U.S. involvement, and this is this is going to send a huge deep economic shock in the world that's already reeling from the current sanctions resulting from the Ukraine crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly a lot at stake here. Carl Zaw, host of the Silk and Steel podcast, thank you so much for your time and insight today.
Thank you, Rachel.
And that's all for today's show. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.